Imagine discovering your ancestry is older than your own origin story. This isn't fantasy. It's the mystery unfolding in the remote highlands of Ethiopia. For centuries, a community called Beta Israel practiced an ancient form of Judaism in isolation. When scientists finally analyzed their DNA, they discovered something impossible: genetic markers that shouldn't exist according to everything we thought we knew about Jewish history. Their blood tells a story older than the Roman exile, older than the Babylonian captivity, possibly even older than the biblical kingdom itself. Tonight, we'll journey through forgotten bloodlines, ancient rituals preserved like insects in amber, and a mystery that challenges the very timeline of human migration. What if some Jews have been Jewish longer than Judaism itself? By the end, you'll question everything you thought you knew about how identity survives across time. The answer lies written not in books, but in blood. The story begins in the isolated mountains of Ethiopia, where for thousands of years, a community practiced Judaism in almost complete isolation from the outside world. They call themselves Beta Israel, the House of Israel. For centuries, Western scholars dismissed their claims of ancient Jewish heritage. They were considered converts at best, their traditions seen as poor imitations of real Judaism. Then, in 1975, after years of debate, Israel officially recognized them as Jews. The world watched as Operation Moses and later Operation Solomon airlifted thousands to Israel, the first mass exodus of black Jews to the Promised Land. But the true revelation came when scientists began studying their DNA. What they found challenged everything we thought we knew about Jewish history. While their genetics showed clear Ethiopian ancestry, buried within their DNA were specific Middle Eastern markers, the same found in other Jewish populations worldwide. But with one crucial difference: these markers had mutations suggesting they separated from other Jewish populations before the commonly accepted Jewish diaspora events, before the Romans destroyed the temple, before the Babylonian exile. It was as if they were frozen in time, preserving Jewish practices abandoned elsewhere thousands of years ago. Their priests performed animal sacrifices mentioned in the Bible, but discontinued by mainstream Judaism after the temple's destruction. They observed purity laws from the Torah that other Jewish communities had modified through rabbinical interpretation. How could this be possible? The answer leads us to one of history's most persistent mysteries, and a king whose name echoes through time. According to Ethiopian tradition, their Jewish origins begin with the most famous encounter in the Bible, when the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon, bearing gold and spices from her wealthy kingdom. Most historians dismiss this as legend, but archaeological evidence confirms extensive trade networks between Jerusalem and the kingdom of Aksum during Solomon's reign. Ethiopian gold has been found in Israelite artifacts from this exact period. Sheba returned to Ethiopia pregnant with Solomon's son Menelik. Years later, Menelik visited his father in Jerusalem, and upon returning to Ethiopia, brought with him both Jewish followers and something far more precious. Hidden within a modest church in Aksum, Ethiopia, guarded day and night by a single monk who can never leave its grounds, is what Ethiopians claim to be the ultimate archaeological treasure: the original Ark of the Covenant. Once a year, Ethiopians celebrate Timkat, parading replicas of the covenant tablets in a ceremony that preserves elements identical to ancient Israelite ark processions described in the Dead Sea Scrolls, rituals lost to mainstream Judaism for millennia. Most scholars dismiss this claim until the genetic timeline emerged. The Beta Israel genetic divergence could align precisely with Solomon's reign, approximately 3,000 years ago. Even more intriguing, broader genetic studies have identified specific Levantine markers appearing in the Horn of Africa approximately 3,000 years ago, exactly when this supposed journey would have occurred. What if the Ethiopian claim isn't just legend? What if it's the missing piece of a historical puzzle, one that explains why the Beta Israel carry genetic markers that predate later Jewish diaspora events? But the mystery only deepens when we look at what happened next, how an isolated community managed to preserve specific bloodlines across 3 millennia. How does identity survive across thousands of years? For most of us, family history fades after a few generations. Yet the Beta Israel maintained not just cultural practices but specific genetic markers despite overwhelming pressure to assimilate. When researchers studied their genetic patterns, they discovered something unusual. Rather than random admixture with surrounding populations, the Beta Israel showed evidence of selective marriage patterns, as if deliberately preserving specific lineages. The most striking example involves the Cohen modal haplotype, a distinct Y chromosome signature found in Jewish priestly lineages worldwide. The Beta Israel carry this marker, but with unique mutations that would require approximately 80 to 100 generations to develop. This isn't just academic curiosity, it's evidence of an unbroken chain of fathers and sons maintaining specific roles across 3 millennia, passing down both traditions and genetic heritage despite wars, migrations, and the powerful pressure to assimilate with surrounding cultures. Their annual Sigd ceremony commemorates the covenant at Mount Sinai, with elements scholars have identified as predating Talmudic Judaism. Standing on mountaintops facing Jerusalem, they preserve prayers lost elsewhere to time. They maintain their own written Torah in Ge'ez, ancient Ethiopic, containing passages with textual variants matching Dead Sea Scroll versions, rather than later standardized texts. It's as if they preserved a branch of Judaism from before Judaism itself was fully formed. But perhaps the most profound aspect of this preservation isn't just genetic. It's how cultural practices became written into biology itself, creating a feedback loop across generations. Recent advances in epigenetics, the study of how environment affects gene expression, have revolutionized our understanding of inheritance. Science now confirms that trauma, dietary patterns, and cultural practices can create heritable changes that pass to future generations. The Beta Israel present a unique case study in this emerging field. Their ritual fasting practices correlate with specific methylation patterns in genes regulating metabolism, patterns matching those in other Jewish populations despite millennia of separation. Their adherence to biblical purity laws may have created specific adaptations to both Middle Eastern and East African pathogens, a biological record of their dual heritage written in their immune system genes. What makes this discovery so profound is how it bridges the gap between culture and biology. The Beta Israel didn't just preserve ancient texts and rituals. Their very bodies became living archives of human migration, recording a journey that preceded written history. When thousands of Beta Israel were airlifted to Israel in Operations Moses and Solomon, they brought with them not just their physical presence, but a living genetic time capsule, one that forces us to reconsider how identity persists across impossible timeframes. Their story challenges our fundamental understanding of what it means to be Jewish, or indeed, what it means to belong to any ancient identity. Is it genetics, culture, religious practice? The Beta Israel suggests something more complex, an interweaving of biology and belief across millennia. The Beta Israel's genetic mystery connects to one of history's greatest religious enigmas, the fate of the Ark of the Covenant. According to Ethiopian tradition, it resides in this modest church, guarded by a succession of monks who can never leave its grounds once appointed. While Western scholars dismissed this claim for centuries, the genetic timeline creates an unexpected possibility. If Beta Israel's ancestors indeed separated from other Jewish populations during Solomon's era, their traditional account gains scientific support. Professor Edward Ullendorf of the University of London gained rare access to examine the Axum object in the 1940s. While scientific analysis remains impossible, he documented elements consistent with biblical descriptions, including acacia, wood construction, and specific golden ornamentations. More telling than physical artifacts is how Beta Israel religious practices preserved elements from the First Temple period, rituals lost to mainstream Judaism after the temple's destruction, but preserved in this isolated community as if frozen in time. What if the Ark story isn't just legend, but the founding moment that explains why a Jewish community in Ethiopia carries genetic markers predating later Jewish diaspora events? What if it represents a deliberate mission to preserve something sacred, both culturally and biologically? The preservation of specific genetic lineages alongside ancient religious practices suggests something beyond random chance, a deliberate cultural mechanism for maintaining identity despite overwhelming external pressures. This brings us to the most profound question of all. What does it mean for our understanding of human identity if specific genetic and cultural markers can persist for thousands of years, despite everything history throws in their path? The Beta Israel paradox forces us to reconsider human migration patterns. If specific Jewish genetic markers reached Ethiopia before commonly accepted diaspora events, what other populations might preserve genetic evidence of forgotten migrations? Their story isn't isolated. From the Lemba of Zimbabwe to the Bene Israel of India, genetic studies increasingly reveal connections predating written history, suggesting human migration patterns far more complex than our simplified narratives allow. Perhaps most profoundly, these findings challenge how we think about time itself. Modern genetic testing can now reveal connections spanning thousands of years, relationships preserved in blood long after memories and written records have faded. What if our bodies remember what our minds have forgotten? What if identity persists through mechanisms more sophisticated than we've imagined? A complex interplay of genetics, culture, and practice that transcends conventional historical understanding. The Beta Israel didn't just preserve ancient DNA, they maintained cultural practices that reinforced their genetic heritage, creating a feedback loop across generations that allowed an isolated community to maintain connections to origins predating written history. The revelation at the heart of the Beta Israel genetic story challenges everything we thought we knew about how identity persists across time. Their DNA suggests some Jews have indeed been Jewish longer than the conventional timeline of Judaism itself. Their journey from isolation in the Ethiopian highlands to integration in modern Israel represents not just a physical migration, but a closing of a historical circle, the return of a branch of Judaism that diverged before many defining historical moments even occurred. What makes this story so compelling is how it mirrors our personal quests for identity. Each of us carries genetic markers of forgotten migrations, lost connections, and ancient origins. The Beta Israel remind us that human connections run deeper and stranger than our simplified narratives suggest. Their paradox invites us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human identity. If cultural practices can create heritable biological changes, and if specific genetic lineages can persist for millennia despite overwhelming external pressure, perhaps identity itself transcends the boundaries of recorded history. What if your own DNA holds a forgotten connection to the past? What if the story written in your genes extends deeper into time than written records suggest? The Beta Israel remind us that identity isn't just what we remember, it's what remembers us. Thanks for watching.